Christmas, the Yuletide season, a time of tradition, ritual, and ceremony, a holiday that is observed by the religious and the secular world alike, a time that seems to bring unity to the entire world, a unity under the concepts of peace, hope, goodwill towards men, Christmas trees, Yule log, mistletoe, and Santa Claus. But let us not forget the birth of a very special child. Americans love Christmas. It is estimated in the year 2016 that the average American will spend $700 on holiday gifts and goodies for the year. This will total more than $465 billion, not including the estimated $8 billion that Americans will spend on decorations, just so that they can light up their houses and so that they can spread the spirit of Christmas. But Americans are not alone in their infatuation with the holiday. There are over 160 different sovereign nations that will celebrate Christmas during this time of the year. Truly, Christmas is a magical time, a time that is celebrated by most of the world. The term Christmas or Christ Mass is made up of two elements, Christos or Christ and Mass. Christos is a title that was used early on in the Greco-Roman Empire to designate various idols such as Apollo, Sol Invictus, and Mithras. However, when the Hebrew Messiah, Hamashiach, the Anointed One, Yahushua the Nazarene, stepped into history, various Romans began to call him by the term Christos, and thus we have the Roman Catholic Church calling the Hebrew Messiah Christos to this very day. When we look at the second element of Christ Mass, the term Mass is short for massacre, and it refers to the literal death of the Messiah. The Mass is understood to be the service of the Roman Church with the office of prayers that are done during the partaking of the Eucharist, which is the sun wafer disc that is consumed to be a picture of the body of Messiah, along with the wine that is drunk that is to symbolize his blood. The Catholics believe that the true Messiah manifests in this disc when they literally eat it, and that they literally drink of his blood every time they partake in the Mass. Christ Mass is a Catholic Mass. It originates with the Catholic Church. This is important to understand. In 350 AD, Pope Julius was the first one to set the official date for the Christ Mass. The Catholic Mass is also referred to as Natalis Invicti, the birth of the Unconquerable One, which takes place on December 25th. If we examine the Catholic Encyclopedia, we will read the well-known solar feast, however, of Natalis Invicti, celebrated on the 25th of December, has a strong claim on the responsibility for our December date. And this is referring to the fact that the Romans previously worshipped Sol Invictus on this day and said that it was the birth of Sol Invictus, who was the sun deity of the Roman Empire, one of many of their sun deities. Originally, the Roman Empire celebrated December 25th as Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun deity known as Sol or Solus, who wore the title Invicti, meaning the unconquered one. This is important to understand because on this day, after the winter solstice on December 25th, the time of daylight would begin to increase yet again in the land. Therefore, this was seen as the time of the rebirth or reincarnation of the sun deity known as Sol and Solus. Sol also has alternative names such as Helios and Apollohelios, also known as Mithras. The word soul gives us terms such as solar and soul, referring to the spirit, or nephesh, as it is said in the Hebrew, of a person or animal. The term soul is so important in the ancient world because the deity himself was thought to be reincarnated inside of the Caesar or Kaiser. And this is the reason that we often see the Caesar or the Kaiser representing himself with the sun ray crown of the soul, or solus invicti. Of course, the normal crown for the Kaiser is the wreath, which we see plays a huge part in the celebration of Christmas. We also see the wearing of the halo. The term halo comes from the word Helios, which is the name of the sun deity as well. Only sun deities wore these crowns in the ancient world. Sun rays, halos, and wreaths were crowns of authority to designate the sun deity in ancient times, along with the Phrygian cap. The Phrygian cap worn by Mithras was a symbol of the sun deity. We see today that Santa Claus and his elves wear the Phrygian cap. Most who celebrate Christmas will at some point wear the Phrygian cap as a means of celebration. This is a cap that is worn by the popes of Rome. We also see that in other cultures, Santa Claus will wear the mitre of the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. It is also important to understand in the ancient religion of the Roman and Greek empires, and it is important to know that they are religions and not just myths, that these deities also were known as the light bearers. The term light bearer in Latin, the language of the Roman Empire, is Lucifer. If the person is a female, if the deity is a female who is bearing the torch, she is known as a Lucifera. Therefore, December 25th marks the birth date of the sun deity, who is known as Sol, Solus Invictus, Apollo, and also known as the Lucifer, the light bearer. Dies Natalis, Solus Invicti, the day of the unconquered sun, his birthday, was later renamed simply Natalis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered one, referring to the so-called Christos, or Christ, which again is just another title for these same deities: Sol, Sol Invictus, Helios, Apollo, and the list goes on and on in the Roman Empire alone. If we look to the Encyclopedia Americana, the 1956 edition, we read under the entry Christmas. Christmas was not observed in the first centuries of the Christian church, since the Christian usage in general was to celebrate the death of remarkable persons rather than their birth. A feast was established in memory of this event in the 4th century. In the 5th century, the Western Church ordered the feast to be celebrated forever on the day of the Mithraic rites of the birth of the sun, and at the close of the Saturnalia, as no certain knowledge of the day of Messiah's birth existed. 2,000 years ago, the eternal Torah, the word and instruction of Yahuwah, the Father, the creator of heaven and earth, became flesh and dwelt, or tabernacled, among us. And his name is Yahushua. The name Yahushua means Yahuwah, the Father, saves, redeems, and delivers. The name of the Son of Yahuwah, the Ben Yahuwah, gives all praise, honor, and credit to Yahuwah the Father, who is in the heavens, as being the source of salvation. And Yahushua is so named because it is said in Matithyahu, or Matthew, that he shall save his people from their sins. This is very important to understand. Yahushua is the Hebrew Mashiach, which means anointed. It has been translated Messiah. The word Mashiach, which means anointed, refers to the smearing of oil, which is done on the heads of all the kings, the sovereigns of ancient Yisrael. Yahushua is the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah. He is the one who the prophets who spoke in the name of Yahuwah declared would come into the world. He is the one that they said would rule over the entire earth and smite the nations with a rod of iron. This is very important because Yahushua was born in Bethlehem, the house of bread, because he said, I am the bread of life. In the city of David or David, he was born and laid in a sukkah, which has been called a manger. And this is to fulfill the words of Micah, the servant of Yahuwah, the prophet of Yahuwah, Micah, in chapter 5, verse 2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, you who are little among the clans of Yehudah or Judah, out of you shall come forth to me the one to become ruler in Yisrael or Israel. And his comings forth are of old, from everlasting. Yahushua, the Hebrew Messiah, had Hebrew students or Talmudim called disciples. They were not Greeks, they were not Romans, they did not celebrate the feast of the sun deities. Yahushua was not born on December 25th. This is a date that is an impossibility according to the scriptures themselves. Yahudim, who are called Jews today, do not and did not observe feast to the sun. They observed the 7 annual feasts of Yahuwah, such as Passover and Sukkot or Tabernacles. They also kept the weekly Sabbath and the yearly Sabbaths and the Jubilees, the Yobelim. It's really important to note that they did not observe pagan holidays and they did not observe birthdays. In the scriptures, the only 2 people in the scriptures who ever observed birthdays were the Pharaoh and Herod. And on both days, they had a human sacrifice take place. Under Herod, it was Yehuchanan the Immerser, or John, who is called the Baptist. Very important to note these things, because Yahushua again was not one of the heathens. He was not a Greco-Roman, and he definitely was not a Roman Catholic. We know that Yahushua could not be born on December 25th according to the book of Lucas or Luke in chapter 2, verse 8. And in the same country there were shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And look, a malach of Yahuwah, a messenger of Yahuwah, stood before them. And the esteem of Yahuwah shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. And the malach, the messenger, said to them, do not be afraid, for look, I bring you good news, the bashar, of great joy, which shall be to all people, because there was born to you today in the city of David a Savior, who is Hamashiach, the Messiah, the Master. It is important to note that the shepherds were tending their flocks by night when this took place, because it is common knowledge that in the land of Yisrael, shepherds in modern times and in the ancient times did not watch their flocks by night in the middle of winter. It is too cold in Yehuda, which is called Judea, during this time of the year for shepherds to watch their flocks by night. Not only is it too cold, but it is also the rainy season. This is common knowledge. The shepherds would not watch their flocks by night any later than the feast of Sukkot, which is called Tabernacles, which happens in the 7th month on the Hebrew calendar, which equates roughly to September or October on the Gregorian calendar. They would stop tending their flocks by night from this time period all the way to the time of Ha'abib, or the Chodesh Ha'abib, the month of the Abib, which is the first month of the year on the scriptural calendar, which takes place roughly around March or April. So this is an impossibility. We know for sure Yahushua was not born in December, and there are many other reasons, but this is very important to understand. It is important to note that the Encyclopedia Americana tells us that Christmas was not observed by the early assembly. In fact, it says that it was not observed in the first centuries of the Christian church. Yahushua is called Hanatzari, meaning the Nazarene. His students were called Hanatzarim, the Nazarenes, which mean literally the offshoots, the watchmen. They were the guardians of the Torah. Shaul, who was called Paul, was called a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarene or the Nazarenes in the book of Acts. They were only called Christians by Romans. Romans who had already seen others believe in the concepts of a son of the Mighty One, and they called them Christians for this reason. We know that even according to Catholic sources, that the term Christian had only begun to be used towards the later time periods of the 1st and 2nd century. So it's really important to note these things. If we look in the New World Encyclopedia, we read, besides its pagan roots, many Christmas traditions have their origins in pagan winter celebrations. Examples of winter festivals that have influenced Christmas include the pre-Christian festivals, the pre-Nazari festivals of Yule, and the Roman Saturnalia. The Feast of Sol Invictus on December 25th was a sacred day in the religion of Mithraism, which was widespread in the Roman Empire. Its god Mithras was a solar deity of Persian origin, identified with the sun. It displayed its unconquerability as Sol Invictus when it began to rise higher in the sky following the winter solstice. Hence, December 25th was celebrated as the sun's birthday. In 274 of the Common Era, Emperor Aurelian officially designated December 25th as the festival of Sol Invictus. This is very insightful when we take all of this information into account. The encyclopedia is telling us time and time again that the worship of Mithra and Sol Invictus were on its highest peak on the birthday during December 25th. When the people worshiped Sol Invictus for his rebirth into the world. If we examine the Encyclopedia Britannica, the 15th edition, in volume 2, if we look under Christmas, we read, in the Roman world, the Saturnalia, which began on December 17th, was a time of merrymaking and exchanging of gifts. December 25th was also regarded as the birth date of the Iranian, which is Persia, mystery god Mithra, as we already read, the son of righteousness. On the Roman New Year, January 1st, houses were decorated with greenery and lights, and gifts were given to children and the poor. To these observances were added the German and Celtic Yule rites. Then the Teutonic tribes penetrated into Gaul, Britain, and Central Europe. Food and good fellowship, the Yule log and Yule cakes, greenery and fir trees, gifts and greetings all commemorated different aspects of this festive season. Fires and lights, symbols of warmth and lasting life, have always been associated with the winter festival, both pagan and Christian. Therefore, we see there is no doubt in the books of knowledge that the people have given us, these encyclopedias that tell us of ancient things and what people did in the ancient world. Even the Catholic Encyclopedia itself tells us that the date, December 25th, is therefore the day of the birth of the sun deity. It is not the day of the birth of the Hebrew Messiah, who is Yahushua. It's very important to note this, because in the ancient world, in all religions, we see that the sun deity of those religions is always born during this time period. For instance, in Egypt, the mother deity, Isis, gives birth to her son Horus every single December 25th. Horus is the sun deity. and this takes place again to mark the winter solstice. On the same time of year, the Greek goddess Leda gives birth to the bright shining Apollo, and Demeter, the great Mother Earth goddess, according to the ancient pagans, bore Dionysus. The shortest day was also the day of the invincible sun in Rome, Dies Natalis Solis Invicti. And in that day, they worshipped Mithra, again, who is the Persian god of light and the guardian against dark and evil and wickedness and all these matters of things. However, these so-called mighty ones, these idols of the pagan world, have their origin in ancient Babylon under the name Tammuz. Tammuz was the sun deity of ancient Babylonia. Very important to note this. In Babylon, the birthday of Tammuz would be celebrated with festivities, singing, rejoicing, and all of this can be verified in Babylonian archaeology, along with the scriptures themselves, the Hebrew scriptures that tell us about the ancient customs of the Babylonians. We see that the ancient Babylonians worship the sun deity, marking the winter solstice as his birth each and every year. According to Genesis chapter 10, Nimrod was the founder of ancient Shinar and Babel or Babylon. The region is known as Mesopotamia. Nimrod was the all-supreme king of the region. He and his wife Semiramis were worshipped and revered as deities. He is identified as the great hunter, the horned one, and especially known as the chief sun deity who wears the sun rays and the Helios crown. Nimrod is known by thousands of aliases all over the world, such as Baal, Molech, Jupiter, Zeus, and the list goes on and on. Semiramis was known as the Queen of Heaven, the Virgin Mother, Ashtaroth, Astarte, Ishtar, Easter, Venus, Diana of the Ephesians, and nearly all female deities of the ancient and modern world can be linked to Semiramis. The religions of Mesopotamia and the surrounding areas have it that Nimrod, who is Baal, was slain for his rebellion against Yahuwah, the Creator, the one who formed heaven and earth in reality. Supposedly, Nimrod was cut into little pieces and his body parts were scattered throughout the region. In an attempt to revive the fallen deity, his wife Semiramis found and assembled all of his parts with the exception of his reproductive organ. And this is where the custom of erecting the tree comes from, because Semiramis, who is known as Ashtaroth and Astarte and Ishtar, erected the evergreen tree as a symbol of the everlasting fertility of Nimrod, who is Baal or Baal. The scriptures refer to this as the celebration and worship of Asherah and the Asherim, which are sacred trees. Semiramis claimed that on December 25th, a full-sized evergreen tree sprang up from a dead stump. This was a way to symbolize the rebirth of Nimrod's reproductive organ each and every year. Semiramis later claimed that Nimrod had ascended into the heights of the heavens, and his spirit was now inside of the literal sun that could be seen in the sky, and each and every day he would ride his chariots across the sky. And eventually the rays of the sun deity Nimrod, had impregnated the wife, the mother deity Semiramis. She was found to be with child, and so she claimed that it was the ray of the sun that impregnated her. Thus her child would be the baby sun deity himself, reincarnated and reborn, who is now known as Tammuz, but known to be the reincarnated Nimrod. And so therefore, Semiramis married Tammuz, her baby child that she had through immaculate conception, because he was the reincarnated father deity Nimrod, and thus the trinity of the pagan world was born. Semiramis married her son, and they continued to rule the empire. In the ancient world, the father, the wife, and the child are worshipped from coast to coast, region to region, on every continent of the planet. The civilization of Babylon has spread throughout the world because it was Nimrod who built the tower in Mesopotamia known as Babel. He wanted to build a tower that would reach the heights of the heavens so that he could be like the Most High according to the scriptures themselves. So therefore, in his rebellion, the languages were changed and all the workers could not understand one another due to the chaos and confusion, which is what the word Babel means. And these workers went throughout the world spreading the religion of Nimrod to the four corners of the earth as they began to inhabit all the various regions. Nimrod was the great-great-grandson of Noach or Noah. After the flood, when people began to multiply on the face of the earth, the stage was set for the world to receive its king, King Nimrod, who ruled over what we call today the cradle of civilization, which is Mesopotamia or Shinar. And the Torah says of Nimrod that he was Gibor Sa'id Lifnei Yahuwah. Gibor means a strong one, a warrior, a tyrant. Sa'id means a hunter. Lifnei means before, against, or to the face of Yahuwah. Therefore, we should understand that Nimrod was in rebellion against Yahuwah, the creator of heaven and earth. And while Nimrod was establishing his satanic empire, where he would be supreme dictator of the entire known world and worshipped by every man, woman, boy, and girl, the patriarch of the Israelite nation was born in Ur of the Chaldees. Later, he moved to Haran, still in Babylon, with his father, and Yahuwah spoke to Abraham, saying, Lech Lecha, get you out from your father's house and come to a land that I will show you. Yahuwah led Abraham out of Babylon, across the river Euphrates, and into the land of Canaan, or Canaan, the promised land. Yahuwah separated Abraham from the idol worship of Nimrod and Baal. Abraham taught his son Yitzhak, who is Isaac, in the way of Yahuwah. And Yitzhak or Isaac taught his son Yaakov or Jacob, who is renamed Yisrael. Yisrael fathered the 12 tribes of Israel, who Yahuwah brought to Mount Sinai and uttered his 10 words or 10 commandments, saying, I am Yahuwah your Elohim. You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image of any likeness which is in the heavens above, the earth beneath, or the waters beneath the earth. You do not bow down to them. You do not serve them. For I, Yahuwah your Elohim, am a territorial El in your midst. Yahuwah warned his people against the idolatry of worshiping Baal and Ashtaroth. But though Yahuwah warned his people, the Israelites fell into the snare of this pagan worship time and time again. For instance, in the wilderness, the Israelites built for themselves a golden calf while Moshe, who is Moses, was up on the mountain. The golden calf symbolized Ra of the ancient Egyptians and also symbolized Baal of the worshippers of Nimrod. This is important to understand. The Israelites also fell into idolatry yet again when they worshiped Baal Peor in the wilderness. Though the Israelites tried very diligently to shake off the worship of Baal, many of the Israelites still worshipped the pagan deity who is the reincarnation of Nimrod. Sadly, the name Baal appears 80 times in the Hebrew scriptures, and even more if you include the titles Baal Peor, Baal Zebub, Baal Zephon, and the list goes on and on. In Judges chapter 2 verse 13 we read, So they forsook Yahuwah, and served Baal and the Ashtaroth. Ashtaroth appears about 20 times or more and refers literally to the female deity known as Ishtar in Babylonia and Astarte, who is identified with the planet and deity Venus. Judges chapter 3 verse 7 reads, "Thus the children of Yisrael did evil in the eyes of Yahweh and forgot Yahweh their Elohim and served the Baalim or the Baals and the Asherim." In the King James Version, we read that they served the Baalim or the Baals and the groves. And that is because the term Asherim or Asherah in the singular literally means a sacred tree. Asherah or Asherim appears 40 times in the Hebrew scriptures. And in every situation in the King James Version, it is translated grove or groves. The term Asherah can be looked up in the Strong's Concordance under H833. It refers again to the groves of sacred trees that were planted in memory of Ashtaroth, the Babylonian female deity who was also worshipped by the Canaanites. She represented the consort of Baal, and the Asherah refers to any image of Asherah or the sacred trees and poles that were set up near her altars. 1 Kings chapter 14 verse 23, "For they also built for themselves high places and pillars and Asherim on every high hill and under every green tree." The heathens worshipped the sacred tree and performed ritual sacrifice under every green tree. Jeremiah chapter 10 verse 2, "Thus said Yahweh, do not learn the way of the nations, the Gentiles, the heathen, and do not be awed by the signs of the heavens. For the Gentiles are awed by them. For the prescribed customs of these people are worthless. For one cuts a tree from the forest, work for the hands of a craftsman with a cutting tool. They adorn it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it does not topple." Yahweh says, do not learn the way of the nations. Do not observe the signs of the heavens, such as the winter solstice. And do not chop down trees and use them in worship. Do not decorate them with gold and silver. Yahweh is specific. He says, do not learn the way of the heathen. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 2. "Completely destroy all the places where the nations which you are dispossessing serve their mighty ones, on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. And you shall break down their altars and smash their pillars and burn their Asherim, their sacred trees, with fire. And you shall cut down the carved images of their mighty ones and shall destroy their name out of that place. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim. Do not put up a sacred tree, a sacred pillar to Yahweh your Elohim." Exodus chapter 34, verse 13. "But break down their altars and smash their pillars and cut down their Asherim, their sacred trees. For you do not bow yourself to another mighty one." Yahweh likens the worship and use of sacred trees to bowing to another mighty one. For Yahweh, whose name is jealous, is a jealous El. Deuteronomy, "Do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah, a sacred tree, near the altar of Yahweh your Elohim, that you make for yourself. Do not set up a pillar which Yahweh your Elohim hates." Yahweh says that he hates the fact that the nations put up Asherim, sacred trees, and pillars. Yahweh says, do not do so to him, and do not plant a sacred tree near his altar. Yet when you go into the Christian church during the time of the winter solstice, they have the sacred tree, the Yule tree, the Babylonian tree of life, the Yalda tree, which they call the Christmas tree, and it is sitting on what they call their altar. They even have the audacity to sing songs to the everlasting fir tree. The carol known as O Christmas Tree today was originally titled O Tannenbaum. Tannenbaum is the word for fir tree in the Germanic language. O Tannenbaum, O Tannenbaum. The carol was written in the 16th century as a folk song, referring to the everlasting fir tree that was used in the worship of Odin and Thor, who the Germanic people originally worshipped. And they decorated these fir trees during the winter solstice during December 25th. And when the Germanic people began to take on Christianity in the 19th century, they adopted the carol to the fir tree as a quote-unquote Christmas carol. Today, when it is sung in the English language, the term Christmas tree is inserted into the text, whereas the original song does not reference Christmas at all, and it never references the Messiah once. It is a carol to the fir tree. The Germanic people and many of the pagans did and still worship trees. All pagan cultures worship the sacred tree, the Asherah, and they do so by wrapping it with tapestries and decorating it, placing gifts at the base of the tree, and making petitions to the tree itself or the deity that the tree represents during this time, during the winter solstice. In 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 7, we read that the women wove hangings or tapestries for the Asherah, for the grove. So the women were making decorations, ribbons for the tree. We see in India, in the Hindu religion, that the worshippers of the Hindu deities will decorate trees. They will wrap them with ribbons. They will make petitions to the deities through the tree, and they will place gifts at the base of the tree. Similar practices are done in all pagan religions, even to this very day. The Zoroastrians, who claim that their religion is about 4,000 years old, still worship Mithra and celebrate Yalda. And during Yalda, they decorate the sacred tree, and they do so in a like manner as the Hindus. Also, we see the Wiccans, who practice witchcraft. The Wiccan religion is generally a revival of the ancient pagan religion of the Europeans. And these Wiccans will celebrate Yule in honor of the deity Woden or Odin, and they will make altars at the base of trees and make petitions to the deities and make various wishes. Interestingly enough, if you ask the average so-called Christian in America and around the world, why do they use the Christmas tree? They cannot give you a rational answer, and they definitely cannot give you a scriptural answer. Anything that they may give you is philosophy and vain deceit. And the really sad part is, at this time, during the information age, the average Christian not only doesn't know this, but doesn't even care, while their leaders fully admit to the pagan origins of Christmas.
Of course, you've got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, this Christmas trees and all the wreaths and all the garlands and all the mistletoe, every bit of them come from Teutonic paganism. They are not an integral part of Christianity. And so for the Seattle airport to say, well, this is a Christian display, is no such thing. It is not a Christian display. It is winter solstice. So if they put up a sign and said, we celebrate winter solstice like the Teutonic gods of Thor and Woden, they'd probably be more accurate. See, the winter solstice a couple of days later was the shortest day of the year, and the pagans had something called Saturnalia. And it was a time of lawlessness because all the laws were suspended. And people, a bunch of singers were actually wandered the streets naked singing. And then they had orgies, sexual orgies. It was a mass thing. Well, when the Catholic Church came along in Italy, the Romans and others didn't want to give up their holidays. So they said, okay, we'll Christianize it. And so they said, okay, we'll say the birth of Jesus was the 25th of December. All this business about mistletoe, pagan. Christmas trees, pagan. Giving out gifts, pagan. Every bit of it is pagan. Every single bit of it is pagan. We've Christianized it all. And so that's good. And so we have time, we celebrate for Jesus. Everybody gets all misty-eyed. But the truth is, they're all pagan.
Again, the Asherah is the Babylonian tree of life. It is used in magic and rituals to this very day. It is a key symbol in the use of Kabbalah. It is a representation of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, though they call it the tree of life. It represents the everlasting phallic of Nimrod. And every time one chops down a tree and brings it into their home, or goes to the nearest convenience store and purchase a plastic tree to decorate it with gold and silver balls, they are worshiping Nimrod, and they are honoring his everlasting phallic symbol. The lights on the tree represent the everlasting life of the sun deity. The angel on top is a key feature in today's Christmas tree. In the scriptures, we never see a malach, a messenger, who is called an angel in the Greek and Roman languages. We never see one represented as a female. However, we often see female angels in the Roman Catholic Church, and those are representations of Semiramis, who is Ashtaroth, Ishtar, Astarte, and the list of her names go on and on. In Assyria, the Babylonian tree of life is decorated with golden pine cones, and on top of the tree we see the image of Asher, who is the symbol of Baal, or literally Mithra, in the ancient world, a representation of the sun deity. Sometimes we will see a five-pointed star on top of the Babylonian tree of life to represent Venus. Other times we will simply see the sun itself, an image of the sun. It is not uncommon to see the Phrygian cap, the cap of Mithra, on top of the Asherah, the Christmas tree, or the representation of Mithra himself through Old Father Tom himself, Santa Claus, who is called Santa Claus today. It is common to find reliefs in ancient Babylon which depict the priest of Dagon, the fish deity, who would become the chief deity of the Babylonians, and they would be decorating the Babylonian tree of life. It is interesting because we see that Dagon and his priest wear the fish hat, the mitre of Dagon, which is the official mitre or hat of the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. This mitre is also worn by Sinterklaas, which is Santa Claus in the Dutch language. The ancient pagans also erected symbols known as matsaba, which are obelisks. Obelisks are used in the worship of Nimrod, just as the tree is. It is a phallic symbol. It was thought to have originated in Egypt. However, today we know that it originates in Babylon. And you can see the matsaba, the obelisk, in Washington, D.C. You see it in St. Peter's Square. You see it in London, and you see it on top of nearly every single Christian church and Roman Catholic building in the world. In ancient Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, the obelisk was used to worship the sun deity Ra and used as a sun dial. It was also used to honor Osiris. The religion of Egypt has it that Osiris was chopped into little pieces and his body parts were scattered throughout the empire, just like the legend of Nimrod. And his reproductive organ was thrown into the Nile and it was swallowed by a fish, which became Dagon of the Philistines. However, getting back to Osiris, he was commemorated by his wife, who found all of his pieces except for his reproductive organ with the obelisk to represent his reproduction and fertility. The Egyptians also decorated trees to honor Osiris. They decorated palm trees and whatever they had that would stay green during the time of the winter solstice. The Roman Catholic Church has an obelisk at St. Peter's Square at the Vatican, which was imported from Egypt and originally used to worship the sun deity Ra. During the winter solstice, during their Christ Mass, the Roman Catholic Church will erect a Christmas tree in Vatican City in St. Peter's Square beside the obelisk which they had imported from Egypt. And you will see that the Christmas tree is in the shape of the obelisk. And many would wonder why they would do this. Perhaps it's because they know something that you don't. The Christmas tree and the obelisk are used in the worship of the ancient demons and devils of the Roman Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, and the list goes on and on. It is well known in the solar cults of the ancient world that the various sun deities were all one and the same, and that they had various manifestations. One of those manifestations was Tammuz. Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 13. And he said to me, you are to see still greater abominations, which they are doing. And he brought me to the door of the north gate of the house of Yahuwah. And I saw women sitting there, weeping for Tammuz. The deities Baal and Tammuz were worshipped by the ancient Moabites under the names Chemosh and Molech. We see that the names changed, but the worship remained identical. The ancient Moabites would celebrate a public child mass, a public child sacrifice during the winter solstice during December 25th. Building up to this most anticipated time of year, all the parents would compile long wish lists that they would like to see in the next year. Then they would bring the infants that were born within that year to the idol Chemosh or Molech. The priest of Chemosh or Molech would stoke large fires inside of the hollow metal idol of the deity. The parent would bring their child screaming to the lap of this deity and lay their child in the lap of Molech, who wore the Phrygian cap that we see that Santa Claus wears to this day, the same cap that Mithra wore. And they would lay their screaming child in the arm of this deity while they begin to profess their long list of desires for the year. Now today we don't see that people are sacrificing their children to Molech, but we do see that they bring their screaming infants, their screaming children, and lay them into the lap of a complete stranger dressed up like a mighty one who they call Santa Claus. And this child is usually screaming their guts out because they're so afraid of this man, and they probably sense the darkness and the demonic forces that are at work. Children, infants, hate Santa Claus, and the proof is in the pictures. Now, of course, after a few years, the child will begin to love Santa Claus and look at Santa Claus as an all-supreme, all-wise, all-knowing, giving deity of prosperity, just as the ancient Moabites looked at Molech and Chemosh. He knows when you are sleeping and he knows when you are awake. In fact, he is all-knowing. He is immortal. He has no beginning and no end. He compiles a list of names on a scroll for the good and the bad children. He rewards the good children with gifts, and he punishes the bad children with lumps of coal reminiscent of the flames of Molech. He answers their prayers and their petitions. He flies on a magical chariot, just like Mithra, Sol Invictus, and Odin before him. In fact, he is a deity of prosperity, worshipped by the people of the world. And it's amazing that Christian parents would put this idol, this image, against the face of Yahuwah and teach their children that gifts come from this magical, all-knowing being, making him a deity. And they will lie to their children and tell them that he exists. And while they're young, they will believe it with all of their heart until finally they are crushed under the realization that their parents had tricked them. And now they will question everything that their parents will ever teach them about the scriptures because of this innocent white lie, as they say. Santa and his elves have a very dark past. Santa is identified as an elf in most of the world. The Celts believed that the elves were witches and wizards, and they were identified by their pointy or Phrygian caps. And they were the teachers of the dark arts. Webster's dictionary describes an elf as a wandering spirit, a fairy, a hobgoblin, an imaginary being which our rude ancestors supposed to inhabit unfrequented places and in various ways to affect mankind. Also, an evil spirit or a devil. Satanist and New Age guru H.P. Blavatsky states that elves are disembodied spirits used in magic and sorcery and are the principal agents in seances. In places like Austria, Hungary, Germany, Italy, and elsewhere, Santa Claus is identified by his original name, which is Sinterklaas. And there are variations of Sinterklaas throughout Europe. Some variations have Sinterklaas riding on a magical flying goat. Other versions have him riding on a magical flying white horse. Either way, he is always accompanied by dark helpers. Usually they are referred to as the Krampus. And the Krampus is a half goat, half man demon that goes with Sinterklaas from house to house. In the 1500s, Sinterklaas became a kind old man who gave gifts and flew on his magical chariot and was accompanied by these dark helpers or blackjacks. He was Christianized as a saint by the name of Nicholas, supposedly based on the saint of Myra in Turkey, who was legendary. He would leave gifts under the sacred tree on his birthday if you had been good, but if you had not, his demons, his Krampuses, would either abduct you or beat you with sticks. Saint Nicholas supposedly captured Satan and called him by various names: the Krampus, Baalzebub, Zwartdeit, or the Black Peter, and Neck Ruprecht. And these were just some of the names. In some of the cultures, Sinterklaas was dropped altogether, and the only remaining figure was the Krampus, which was kept and known as Weihnachtsmann, which means Santa Claus in the Germanic languages. In other words, in some cultures, Santa Claus is known to be Satan himself, who is the Krampus. Now let us look at some clips of Sinterklaas in Europe. But be warned, some of these images may be disturbing.
Ich bin der heilige Nikolaus, bringe Glück und Segen in dieses Haus. Die Braven, die werde ich heute belohnen. Und falls doch jemand schlimm war, für den hätte ich die Krampusse mitgebracht. So, Ruhe, Krampusse.
Danke.
And these are the satanic origins of the Anglicized Santa Claus, who is Sinterklaas, and his elves, the goat-headed demons. And this is important to understand because the goat-headed mighty one is worshipped in the religion of Satanism and in pagan worship by the name Baphomet. He is also called the Horned One or the Stag Deity. Sometimes he is depicted with the horns of the goat, and sometimes he is depicted with the horns of the reindeer. In the 1970s, the Second Vatican Council stated that no Roman Catholic bishop by the name of Saint Nicholas ever existed. This is historical because people will often say, well, Saint Nicholas was a real person, but the Second Vatican Council states no such person ever existed. They go on to state that the legends attributed to Saint Nicholas had no Christian origin and probably came from pagan traditions. So therefore, the character known as Saint Nicholas is a myth. He is nothing more than a pagan deity who has been revamped and Christianized, just like Christianity has Christianized Christmas. The Oxford English Dictionary states the devil is called Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and even in popular rustic speech, he is called Old Nick.
Way up north where the air gets cold, there's a tale about Christmas that you've all been told, and a real famous cat all dressed up in red, and he spends the whole year working out in his sled. It's the little Saint Nick, little Saint Nick. It's the little Saint Nick, little Saint Nick.
The Concise Dictionary of English Etymology also agrees that Nick is the devil. Old Nick was a well-known British name for Satan. The Greek name Nicholas means the conqueror of the people. Revelation chapter 2 verse 15 reads, "So you also have those who adhere to the teaching of the Nicolaitans or the Nicolaitans, which teaching I hate." The teaching of the Nicolaitans came from their teacher Nicholas, who taught them that it was okay to eat food sacrificed to idols and to commit whoring, to make the children of Israel stumble. This is most likely the origin of the saint called Nicholas of the Roman Catholic Church. In the 1600s, a series of plays were developed starring a character known as Robin Goodfellow, who was a half-man, half-goat demon. In The History of a Hobgoblin, author Alan W. Wright reveals that Robin itself was a medieval name for the devil, and that Robin's trademark laugh was ho, ho, ho. During the 1600s, this goat-headed devil had already revealed the trademark laugh that Santa Claus would later take on.
Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Ho, ho, ho.
In Scandinavia, the winter festival was Yule. In the Chaldean language, Yule means the infant, the child, referring to the baby Tammuz. Apparently, the Scandinavians borrowed the term for their winter festival. On December 21st, Odin, who was the chief deity, would fly through the night on his 8-legged horse, which would symbolize the 8 reindeer of Santa Claus. Odin was represented as an ancient man with a long white beard. His idols portray him with a pointy hat, like the elves and Santa Claus wear. People feared the wrath of Odin, who had come to take the spirits of the dead. They would leave treats and grain offerings for Odin and his horse. Spirits would roam freely during this time of the year, and the worshippers would try to communicate with these spirits. Evergreen trees would be brought inside to represent eternal life and the conquering of death of the sun deity. Mistletoe was revered by the Druids. Mistletoe has no roots in the ground, therefore it is seen as a gift from the heavens. On the 6th day of the moon, the Druids would cut the sacred mistletoe with a golden sickle, which was caught with sheets by priests beneath and not to be touched with human hands. Germanics believed that all who passed beneath a mistletoe were kissed by Freya, the goddess of fertility, and were blessed with sexual powers. During this time of the year, it is believed that the horned deity, the stag deity, would return to the earth, who is symbolized as Pan in the ancient Greco-Roman pantheon. In Scandinavia today, the Santa is still a goblin, and this is seen as the dark time of the year. To celebrate Yule, one must deck the halls with boughs of holly and bring evergreens into the home. And they had to bring a large log into the home that they would burn for 12 days. This is where the 12 days of Christmas comes from. It had to be kindled with a piece of the log that came from the year before. And this was to keep the ancestral spirits happy, who were believed to live within the fire. Therefore, the fire was kept burning with offerings of food and sacrifice. Originally, the sacrifice was made of humans and animals. The World Book Encyclopedia states the belief that Santa comes down through the chimney developed from an old Norse legend. The Norse believed that the goddess Hertha appeared in the fireplace and brought good luck to the home. It continues that Druids worshipped a deity named Hertha. Druid homeowners would leave a treat consisting of milk and pastries to appease this deity that came down into their chimney, into their fireplace. And this is where the idea of leaving milk and cookies out for Santa Claus originates. Pagans, who are called Wiccans and witches today, still celebrate Yule and still worship the deities Odin, Thor, and those of the pagan pantheon, such as the stag deity himself, who is the horned one.
Let's remember that although this is our time of year, a lot of people refer to this time of year as Christmas. That there's an awful lot of folks out here who think that Christmas is the original holiday at this time of year, and we kind of gently, I know Frank and I kind of gently nudge our Christian friends and say, just remember, you got all this stuff from us, because we started this. The tradition of Santa actually comes from the tradition of the Oak King and the Holly King. And Santa is actually the Holly King, who dies at this time of year and gives way to the Oak King to bring back the springtime, because the Oak King reigns during the spring and summer, and the Holly King reigns during the fall and winter. And so Santa's ride is kind of his passing the hat off to the Oak King for the spring and summer. So there are a lot of our traditions are incorporated. This is a very pagan holiday because it is. Also, the Christmas tree, our Christmas tree, or our Yule tree as we refer to it, is a very pagan holiday, and what you're doing is bringing in the greenery into your house so that you're bringing in life and vitality and all that the evergreens represent.
Well, growing up, I grew up with my parents who are not pagan, but we did the whole Christmas tree, so it kind of flowed very nicely into what I do now for the most part.
To all the old gods and the gods of the woods, as we've come through the season of hibernation and darkness, we look forward to the light and the rebirth as spring comes forward.
Lord and Lady, we ask that you bless this drink, red as the blood that runs through our veins. May it bring us life, light, and vitality. May it bring us passion and love.
1,000 miles away from Scandinavia, the pre-Catholic Roman Empire was celebrating the feast of Saturnalia during the winter solstice. This was the time that the sun entered Capricorn, which was of the house of Saturn. As the name implies, Saturnalia was a celebration to the deity Saturn. Saturn was originally known as Kronos in the Greek Empire. The ancient Chaldeans identified him with Kion and Molech. December 17th through the 23rd marked a one-week celebration to mark the winter solstice. This was done to reenact the golden age of Saturn when he ruled over the world according to their religion. Originally, Saturn was seen as the chief father deity, the master of time and the harvest, known as Father Time himself, who would become Santa Claus. The entire month was a celebration of food and drink in honor of the great bounty that was bestowed upon Rome from the patron deity Saturn. The courts would take this time off and no one could be charged for criminal acts. It was a time of lawlessness, misconduct, and loose behavior. During this time, the social order was turned upside down. Slaves would dress as masters, and masters wore the garments of slaves. Homosexuality and cross-dressing were commonplace. The Romans decorated trees with ornaments and fruit. They decked their halls with boughs of holly and wreaths in honor of Saturn. Gifts were exchanged, which ranged from clothes, pottery, books, candles, toys, and pets, and basically you name it. Special dolls were given to children to symbolize the human sacrifices that had taken place in the years before the Roman celebration had outlawed the sacrifice of people. And we see that Saturn usually is eating a child because Saturn ate his own children. To remember the heads of human sacrifices, ceremonial masks would be worn and used as decorations in their stead. Widespread intoxication and going house to house singing naked, rape, and eating human-shaped biscuits were among the common celebrations done during Saturnalia. Children were allowed to partake in the drunken festive orgies during the celebration of Juvenalia, which was part of the larger celebration of Saturnalia. Saturnalia was the X-rated Mardi Gras or Carnival of the ancient Roman Empire. The Romans would choose a lord of misrule to be ruler over these events. The individual was allowed to have all that he desired in regards to food, alcohol, drugs, and sexual deviances. After the Saturnalia, the lord of misrule was to commit suicide on the altar of Saturn. Just a few days later, the celebration of the sun deity would commence, the celebration of Mithra, known as Helios and Apollo. The book of Revelation, known as Chazon, identifies Apollo in chapter 9, verse 11. And they have over them a sovereign, a king, the messenger, the malach, what people call angel, of the pit of the deep, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon, which is Apollo, the sun deity. In the Hebrew name Abaddon, he is identified as the goat-headed deity, but in the Greek culture, he is the sun deity. And we see this happen time and time again with all the pagan civilizations, that the sun deity is often identified as the horned one. Every time you observe December 25th, you are honoring the ancient deities of the sun: Apollo, Mithra, Tammuz, Baal, Nimrod, and the horned one himself, Shaitan, Satan, the dragon of old, who is also Molech. In the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 1, and a great sign was seen in the Shemaim, in the heavens, a woman clad with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And being pregnant, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. This is telling us the exact timing of Yahushua's birth. You see, Yahushua was born of a virgin, of a Bethulah in the Hebrew. And when it says a woman was clad with the sun, this is speaking of the fact that the sun would be in the house of Virgo, or Bethulah, the virgin, and upon her head would be the 12 stars of the constellation known as Leo, or Aryeh in Hebrew. Aryeh Yehuda, the lion of the tribe of Yehuda. When it says that the moon was under her feet, that is to let you know that this takes place during the monthly cycle of the virgin, or of Bethulah, which is the 7th month on the Hebrew calendar. And this is the time period when the festival of Sukkot, or tabernacles, would take place. Yahushua was born in a manger, which is a stable. The Hebrew word for stable is a sukkah. So therefore it should be understood that Yahushua, the Hebrew Messiah who tabernacled among us, was not born on December 25th, the winter solstice, the birthday of all these pagan sun deities of the Babylonian, Greek, and Roman empires and all the empires of the world, but rather was born on the festival of tabernacles, Sukkot, to fulfill the words of the prophets and the scriptures. 200 years before the Word became flesh and Yahushua was born in Bethlehem, or Bethlehem, Antiochus Epiphanes, the pagan king of the Greeks, marched against Jerusalem and overthrew the temple of Yahuwah. Yahuwah allowed this to take place because his people had forsaken him and began to worship Baal and Ashtaroth and all the pagan deities all around them. So Yahuwah allowed his temple to be defiled by this heathen king, Antiochus Epiphanes, who had declared himself to be a deity. He came into the house of Yahuwah and sacrificed a swine on the altar, and he set up an image of Zeus, or Jupiter as he called it, which is Jupiter. And there he honored the deities of the pagan pantheon. And he did this on December the 25th. So therefore, when the Word became flesh and Yahushua came into the world, his people had already been burned by the pagan sun worship. You see, the Maccabees, who overthrew Antiochus Epiphanes, they had to rededicate the temple of Yahuwah and rededicate the altar and purify the place where Yahuwah's presence would manifest. And this time of dedication in Hebrew was called Hanukkah. You see, when the altar is dedicated, according to the Torah, it must be dedicated for 8 days. And that time period of dedication, the Torah itself calls it Hanukkah. Therefore, when the Maccabees celebrated Hanukkah, it was the establishing of Yahuwah's house, and it was the purification and the dedication of the place of the sacrifice. This is important to understand. Yahushua was very familiar with the pagan worship of the Romans. You see, when Yahushua was born and he came into the world, he lived in a place that they call Judea, which is Yehuda. And in the land of Yehuda, the Romans had jurisdiction. They ruled over the land. They had set up a fake king, King Herod, who in fact was an Edomite. And these Romans worshipped all of their deities and celebrated all of these holidays. And they celebrated the Saturnalia. Yahushua saw them celebrating the Saturnalia. He saw the wreaths. He saw the trees. He saw the drunkenness. He saw the loose behavior. He saw those who were dedicated to worshiping the sun that Yahuwah Elohim had made. He saw all this, and he sees you today doing the same thing. And he sees you the same way he saw those Romans, that they were lost. Yahushua spoke to the Samaritan woman saying, "You worship what you do not know, but the salvation is of Yehudah, is of the Yahudim, the Jews." Yahushua is the lion of the tribe of Yehudah. He did not tolerate pagan worship, and he does not tolerate it today. He is alive. He resurrected. He is still watching, and he still knows. Yahweh Elohim has established his son, and his son will return, and he will destroy the pagan worship that is being done on the earth, in which Christmas is one of the largest pagan holidays observed by the entire world. The Torah itself says in Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 12, verse 30, guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about their mighty ones, their Elohim, saying, how did these nations, talking about the Canaanites, how did these nations serve their Elohim, their mighty ones? And let me do so too. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim. For every abomination which Yahweh hates, they have done to their mighty ones. For they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. All the words I am commanding you, guard to do it. Do not add to it, and do not take away from it. Christmas both adds to the word of Yahuwah and takes away from the word of Yahuwah, because it adds to a pagan observance that must be done in the Christian world, and those who do not do it will be shunned and treated as outsiders. It is seen as a religious rite in their community. And it also takes away, because it takes away all the truth in the scriptures, and it gives ammunition to a generation who is lost and dying and looking for every excuse that they can find to bypass the word of Yahuwah. So when they see that this character that you call Jesus was born on December 25th, and they link it up to the worship of Mithra and all these sun deities, what choice do they have but not to believe you? Because they haven't seen the truth. That is why this truth must go forth. You say you do it for the children, but this message has to go forth for your children, because they're lost and they're dying, and under this type of guidance, they will burn in the flames and be destroyed when Yahushua HaMashiach, the Master, comes, because this is a pagan observation. Yahuwah said, do not do to me what they did to their mighty ones. Don't say you can Christianize it. Don't say you can take it and make it for yourself. It's not yours to do that with. It doesn't matter what it means to you. It matters what it means to him. He's the eternal one. He's the one who's seen all of this go on throughout the ages. He's the one who's been observing. He's the one who says what it means, and he means what he says. Do not do it to him. You cannot do it to him and say that you truly love him. It's impossible. Or you would do what the scriptures teach. Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 18, verse 10. Let no one be found among you who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices divination, or a user of magic. In the King James Version, they translate this, one who observes times. One who observes times or omens. And in the Hebrew, it's me'onen. Me'onen can both mean magic, sorcery, and one who observes pagan times, such as the winter solstice. Remember, Yirmiyahu said to not be dismayed by the signs of the heavens. And it says, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. Because if you think about it, all of these people, the spiritists, the magicians, the witches, the warlocks, these are their holidays. Don't allow someone to even live, Yahuwah says, amongst the children of Israel, who celebrates these pagan holidays. And then these people today say, but we do it unto the Lord. Okay, well, you do not do it unto Yahuwah, the Elohim of creation, the one who sent his son, Yahushua, the Messiah of Israel. But yes, you do it to the Lord, because the word Baal in Hebrew means in English Lord, simply. It simply means Lord. So yes, you do it to Baal. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 20, no, but what the nations, the Gentiles offer, they offer to demons. These are the words of Shaul, the student of Yahushua, who's quoting the Torah. And he says, no, but what the nations, the Gentiles offer or slaughter to, they slaughter to demons. and not to Elohim. And I do not wish you to become sharers with demons. You are not able to drink the cup of the master and the cup of demons. You are not able to partake of the table of the master and of the table of demons. And surely Shaul in his travels saw the Romans celebrating the Saturnalia with the wreaths and with the trees during the winter solstice, and observing Sol Invictus on December 25th as his birthday. And Shaul goes on to say to the Galatians in chapter 4 verse 10, you observe days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you, lest by any means I have labored for you in vain. Shaul is referring to the pagan holidays that the Galatians had formerly kept. And we know this in the great context of the actual scriptures, but we also know this because Shaul told the Corinthians to observe the Passover. And Shaul kept all the feasts of Yahweh because he was a student of Yahushua HaMashiach, who's the anointed one of Israel, who is the teacher of the law, of the Torah, of Yahweh, his father. Nearly 300 years after Yahushua had resurrected and ascended into the heavens, the Roman Empire supposedly became Christian or Catholic when Emperor Constantine had a vision of a Kairos symbol while gazing at the sun. Within the Kairos symbol, he saw the cross and heard a voice that said, "Come and conquer in this image." In 312 of the Common Era, Emperor Constantine signed an edict to make the entire nation a Christian nation. He belonged to the cult of Mithra, and the Kairos symbol that he saw was a Mithraic symbol. Priests who had formerly been priests of Mithra were now made Christian priests or Catholic priests at the stroke of a pen. Nearly all Roman deities were given Christian names and titles, such as Eupater, the abomination of desolation, which the Roman Church renamed to Saint Peter. Coins depicting Sol Invictus and Mithra appear around 313 to 326 of the Common Era, minted by Constantine, proving that he had never given up his allegiance to Sol Invictus, who is Mithra. Constantine outlawed all the Sabbaths that Yahweh had told the children of Israel to keep, and the feast found in the scripture, which Yahushua and his disciples kept. Statuettes of Sol Invictus can be found on the Arch of Constantine. Constantine's triumphal arch was carefully positioned to align with the colossal statue of Sol that used to be by the Colosseum, so that Sol would be the dominant backdrop to his enormous arch. And this is important because this also tells us again that Constantine never stopped worshiping the sun deity. And this is why on March the 7th of 321 of the Common Era, Constantine decreed Dies Solis, the day of the sun deity Sol. Sunday would be the Roman day of rest. He effectively changed the Sabbath to Sunday. Originally, the holiest day of the year to the Roman Empire was the birthday of Mithra or Sol Invictus, who was born during the winter solstice. So in the 4th century, the Catholic Church adopted the Christ Mass on the day of Mithra, December the 25th. Catholics also adopted the image of Apollo Helios. And remember, Apollo is the sovereign, the king, the messenger of the abyss, of the deep. He is a demon. And they used Apollo Helios to represent their version of the Christos, the Christ. In this portrayal, he is a beardless figure with a flowing cloak in a chariot drawn by 4 white horses. An example can be seen under St. Peter's Basilica, and this dates to the 4th century, showing that the Catholics in the 4th century were dedicated to the worship of Apollo, Mithra, Sol Invictus, or whatever name you want to give him. By the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church had replaced most of the religions in Europe by Christianizing pagan holidays to make their religion more palatable to the pagans. Christmas in England was originally similar to Saturnalia. In the early 17th century, led by Oliver Cromwell, the Puritans overthrew the king. In 1652, they outlawed Christmas altogether. Churches had to remain closed and businesses had to remain open. However, the king would eventually be restored, and so would Christmas. In 1620, Puritans arrived in the New World. Christmas was then immediately outlawed. We still have a public notice from this time period, which reads, "Public notice, the observation of Christmas has been deemed sacrilege. The exchanging of gifts and greetings, dressing in fine clothing and feasting and similar satanical practices are hereby forbidden, with the offender liable to a fine of 5 shillings. Therefore, the Puritans acknowledged that Christmas was a satanic holiday. Due to the Puritan ban on Christmas, it would take nearly 200 years for Christmas to catch on in America. And it did so in the mid-1800s due to the massive influx of immigrants. In the mid-1800s, you could find Christmas nearly everywhere except for the Protestant church. Clement Clarke Moore wrote "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" during this time period, which showed Americans how to observe the holiday. "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" is still quoted to this very day. In 1863, Thomas Nast, cartoonist for Harper's Weekly, depicted the jolly fat Santa Claus, who he had created from Santa Claus, in over 30 illustrated pictures. Santa first started showing up in department stores around this time period. Gowdy's Ladies Magazine printed a photo of Prince Albert and Queen Victoria depicting a Christmas tree in the backdrop, and then all of a sudden the Christmas tree took hold in America because of this. In 1856, President Franklin Pierce was the first person to put a Christmas tree in the White House. Most of what you know and love about Christmas was concocted in the mid-1800s to the early 1900s, created by the media, Hollywood, and the establishment, and has no root in the origin of the early settlers in the Americas.
Ho, ho, ho.
The scriptures teach us that we should not believe every spirit, but that we should test the spirits to see if they are truly of Yahuwah. And we can clearly see that Christmas is not of Yahuwah, but is rather a satanic holiday that should never be observed. Now is the time to repent, to heed the message of Yahushua, which he said in Revelation chapter 18. He said, "Come out of Babylon, my people, that you will not be partakers of her sins, because her sins have reached up into the heavens." And we know that now is the time of judgment. It is time to repent and leave your pagan sun deity worship far behind you. But ultimately, the decision is yours. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yahuwah.